So how often should we reinforce a behavior? Right? If our goal is to modify behavior, we want to create a specific behavior, how often should we offer our reinforcement? Well, there are a couple ways of thinking about it. One is you can say every single time, right? So every time somebody does the behavior, you offer the reinforcement, right? So if you wanted to train your dog to do a trick, you'd say, you want them to sit, so they'd sit and you give them some food. And you say sit, and if they sit, you give them some food. And every time you say sit, if they sit, you give them some food, right? So in this case, we're reinforcing every single time the behavior is done. It's called continuous reinforcement. Turns out this is pretty effective. The behavior will be learned fairly quickly, but it produces a problem. What happens when you stop providing the food? When you want the dog to just sit, in a given context or situation, and you're not able to provide an immediate reinforcement, right? How many times is the dog going to sit without food before it realizes, well, I'm not getting reinforced anymore, I'm done doing that behavior, right? If I'm offering to pay you every time you do something, and I start doing it, you do it, I pay you, you do it, I pay you, you do it, I pay you, and then suddenly I just stop paying you, how quickly will you stop doing it? Right? This is called extinction, the loss of the behavior when reinforcement is no longer available. It turns out continuous reinforcement is highly susceptible to extinction. So maybe we don't reinforce every single time. These are called schedules of reinforcement. Rather than reinforcing every time behavior is done, we limit reinforcement in some way. There are two major ways in which we can limit it. We can limit it in a way that is called time limited or interval limited. This means that the reinforcement is only offered after a certain amount of time has passed. Right? How do you know something is time limited or interval limited? Because the limiting factor in how often the reward is given is based on the passage of time. Doing the behavior more often does not increase the frequency of the reward. You have to wait over time. If you can predict when the reinforcement's coming, it's called fixed. Fixed just means it's predictable. And this is a very common type of reinforcement in jobs. Most people are paid based on a fixed interval, once a week, or every 2 weeks, or once a month. Once you receive your paycheck, when do you get your next paycheck? Well, after 2 weeks. And then when do you get your next paycheck? After 2 weeks, right? Notice that it is a fixed interval, right? It is based on time and it's predictable. We can also have variable interval, which means we can't predict it. For example, posting something on social media, we do that. We get rewarded with likes and comments. Checking the site over and over again doesn't increase the frequency at which those likes or comments are going to come. You just have to wait a while. It takes a while for friends to get online, to read it, to respond to it, to like it, right? So time must pass, but you don't know how long it'll be. You might get a bunch right away, and then a few 10 minutes later, then a few, later that evening, right? You have no way of predicting when it'll occur, but it is still time-based. The second way that we can reinforce is through behavior response, or what's often called the ratio limited, which means that every X number of times the behavior is performed, we're going to reward it. That's why it's a ratio. It's every, X number of behaviors gets a reward. Right? Every 3 times you get the candy. Every 10 times you get paid. Right? Every 3rd time you press the lever, you get food. Whatever it is, right? You know that it is ratio limited when doing the behavior more is going to get you more reinforcement. It's not based on time. It's based on how often you do the behavior. Just like interval, we can have fixed ratio, right? If I told you, for every 10 boxes you fold for me, I'm going to give you $1. Well, if you want to make $1, what do you have to do? You have to fold 10 boxes, right? It's every 10 times. If you want another $1, you have to fold 10 more boxes. Want another $1, fold 10 more boxes. We know it's ratio limited because folding more boxes more quickly is going to produce more reinforcement. It's fixed because we know when it's occurring. There's also what we call variable ratio, which is when we don't know how many times we have to do it to get the response. Right? It's unpredictable. Right? Kid throwing a tantrum at the store, parent doesn't give in every time, but every once in a while the parent will give in, right? That's a variable ratio. The more often you do the behavior, the more likely you are to get the reward, but you don't know when it's coming. Right? So your two main types of limiting reinforcement are interval or time, ratio or behavior. And both of those are either fixed or variable depending on whether they're predictable or unpredictable. So let's take a look at a few possible reward schedules. So go ahead and pause the video here, go through each 10 of these, and do pause the video. Work these out yourselves. Identify whether they're variable or fixed, interval or ratio. Right? Figure out both of them, go through each of them, go through all 10 of them, write your answers down, then come back and start the video again. Hopefully you have actually worked through these. Trust me, work through them on your own. It'll help us make more sense. But let's work through it now together. So rat gets food every third time it presses the lever. Well, if the rat wants more food, what does it have to do? It has to perform the behavior. The more frequently the rat presses the lever, the more food it gets. Therefore, it is ratio based. Is it predictable? Yeah, every third time. So therefore, it's fixed ratio. Getting paid weekly no matter how much work is done? Well, you get paid weekly. Once you get paid, what do you have to do? You have to wait a week. Doing more work, it doesn't mean you get the paycheck any faster. Therefore, it is interval based, and since it is weekly, it's predictable and therefore fixed interval. Getting paid for every 10 boxes you make? Well, we covered that one just a minute ago. Sure enough, fixed ratio. Hitting a jackpot sometimes on a slot machine. Does playing the slot machine more increase the likelihood of getting a jackpot? Yeah. Right? If somebody plays the slot machine 1,000 times, they're more likely to win than somebody that plays it once. So therefore, it's ratio. But do we know when a machine is going to hit? No. Therefore, it's variable ratio. Winning sometimes on a lottery you play once a day, this might have hung you up a little bit, right? Because you play the lottery once a day, so it's obviously time-based. But the more lottery tickets you buy, the more likely you are to win. Well, turns out it is both interval and ratio. Unpredictable, so it's variable. Checking your cell phone all day, sometimes getting a text. Does checking your cell phone make it more likely you'll get the text? Nope, it's based on time, but it's also unpredictable. Variable interval. Buy 8 pizzas, get the next one free. Buying more pizzas means more free pizza. Predictable, fixed ratio. A fundraiser averages 1 donation for every 8 houses visited. Okay, so it's based on behavior, so it's going to be ratio, but is it fixed or variable? Well, even if something averages every 8 houses, if you can't predict which specific house is going to get the donation, it is still variable even if the average is constant. Kid has a tantrum, parents sometimes give in, variable ratio, and then lastly, repeatedly checking your mail until the paycheck arrives, fixed interval.